I'm Rebecca, and I'm 34 years old. 3 months ago, my sister Claire kicked me out of our childhood home in Charleston, South Carolina, screaming that I was a disgrace to the family and didn't deserve a single brick of our grandmother's estate. She stood on that wraparound porch, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at me like I was trash, her voice shaking with rage I'd never seen before. Grandma Rose knew exactly what kind of person you are, Rebecca. You abandoned this family. You chose your life over US. Now get out before I call the police. I remember standing there in the driveway, my hands trembling, my throat tight with tears I refused to shed in front of her. Behind Claire stood my mother, arms crossed, lips pressed into that thin line of disappointment I'd seen my entire life. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. I drove away that day with nothing but my purse and my dignity, watching that beautiful Victorian house disappear in my rearview mirror, the house where Grandma Rose raised me, loved me, taught me to be strong. I had no idea that driving away was actually the beginning of everything changing. You see, nobody knew what I knew. Nobody understood why Grandma Rose and I had a bond that went deeper than blood, deeper than Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings. They saw me as the granddaughter who moved to Boston for college and never came back, who missed holidays, who built a life 2 states away from family obligations and small-town expectations. They called me selfish. They called me cold. Claire especially made sure everyone knew that I'd abandoned Grandma Rose in her final years, that I barely visited, that I was too busy with my fancy city life and my career to care about family. What they didn't know was that Grandma Rose and I talked every single night. What they didn't know was that I sent her books and flowers every week. What they didn't know was that she told me things, trusted me with truths that would shatter their perfect little narrative about who deserved what in this family. When Grandma Rose died 6 months ago, I came home for the funeral. I took a week off work, booked a hotel because I knew I wasn't welcome at the house, and I showed up in black, ready to mourn the woman who understood me better than anyone in this world. Claire barely looked at me. Mom gave me one of those stiff hugs that feels more like duty than love. At the reception after the service, I overheard Claire talking to our Aunt Margaret about the will, about how, of course, everything goes to family who actually stayed, who actually cared, who actually showed up when it mattered. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, that old childhood feeling of never being enough for them, never fitting their mold of what a good daughter, a good granddaughter should be. I left the reception early. I couldn't stand another minute of their judgment, their whispers, their satisfied smiles that said, "You reap what you sow." 2 months after the funeral, the estate lawyer, Mr. Harrison, called me. I was at my office in Boston, halfway through a design presentation, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. "Ms. Rebecca Morgan," his voice was formal, careful. "This is Thomas Harrison. I'm handling your grandmother Rose Bennett's estate. I need you to come to Charleston for the reading of the will. It's important that you be there in person." Something in his tone made my skin prickle. "My sister told me I wasn't included in the will," I said carefully. There was a long pause. "Ms. Morgan, your presence is not optional. It's required. Please arrange to be at my office next Friday at 2 p.m. Come alone." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart racing, my mind spinning with possibilities I didn't dare hope for. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I booked a flight, took another day off work, and showed up at Mr. Harrison's office in downtown Charleston on that Friday afternoon. The office was old money, all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place where generations of Charleston families had settled their affairs with handshakes and honor. Mr. Harrison was probably 70, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen every kind of family drama imaginable. He shook my hand firmly and gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. Your sister and mother have already been here, he said quietly. I send them home. What I'm about to tell you needs to be private first. My pulse jumped. I don't understand. He opened a folder, pulled out documents that looked official and complicated, and looked at me with something like respect. Your grandmother left very specific instructions. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew it would cause complications. What I discovered in that office didn't just change my life. It exposed a family secret that had been buried for 34 years. Keep watching. Mr. Harrison slid the first document across his desk toward me, and I recognized Grandma Rose's handwriting immediately on the top page. It was a letter, dated just 3 weeks before she died, written in her careful, elegant script. Read this first, Mr. Harrison said gently. Then we'll discuss the legal documents. My hands shook as I picked up the letter. My dearest Rebecca, it began, and I could hear her voice in my head, warm and strong even in her final days. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine Claire and your mother are very angry right now. I need you to understand why I've done what I've done, and I need you to know the truth about your place in this family. The truth I've protected your entire life. I had to stop reading for a moment because my vision blurred with tears. Mr. Harrison quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk. I took a breath and continued. You were 3 years old when you came to live with me, Rebecca. Your mother told everyone you were her second daughter, born when Claire was 5, but that was a lie designed to protect reputations in a town that doesn't forgive scandal. The truth is that you are not your mother's daughter. You are mine. The words on the page swam. I read them again. And again. You are my daughter, Rebecca. Your father was the love of my life, a man I met after your grandfather died, a man from Atlanta who worked at the university where I taught art history. We had a brief, beautiful love affair, and then he died in a car accident before I even knew I was pregnant with you. I was 48 years old, widowed, with a grown daughter of my own, and suddenly expecting a baby in a conservative southern town where such things were simply not done. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe properly. Mr. Harrison sat quietly, letting me process, his hands folded on his desk. The letter continued. Your mother, my daughter Sarah, was married to your father Tom by then, and they'd been struggling to have a second child. She was desperate for another baby, and I was desperate to avoid scandal and protect my teaching position. We made a terrible bargain, Rebecca. She would raise you as her own, and in return, I would help them financially, help them buy the house, help with everything. But I had one condition. You would spend every summer with me, every holiday, and I would be intimately involved in your life. I needed to be your grandmother in name, but your mother in heart. Suddenly, everything made sense. The way Grandma Rose looked at me with such fierce love. The way she defended me against my mother's criticisms. The way she always took my side, always understood me, always made me feel like I mattered. The way my mother had always kept me at arm's length, never quite as warm with me as she was with Claire. The way Claire had always been the golden child, while I was somehow always the outsider. As you grew, the letter went on, I watched you become this brilliant, independent, creative soul, and I was so proud. But I also watched my daughter Sarah fail to love you the way you deserved. I watched her favor Claire, watched her judge you, watched her make you feel like you were never enough. It broke my heart. But our agreement was that I couldn't tell you the truth while she was raising you. I promised to let her be your mother, even though every cell in my body screamed that you were mine. The letter explained more. How Grandma Rose had paid for my college education out of her own savings, not family money, like I'd been told. How she'd set up a trust fund for me that my mother and Claire knew nothing about. How she'd protected me from a distance while watching me grow into a woman she was proud to call her daughter. When you moved to Boston, she wrote, Sarah told everyone you'd abandoned us, but I knew the truth. You were finding yourself, building a life on your own terms, becoming the person you were meant to be. Our nightly phone calls were the highlight of my days, Rebecca. Hearing about your life, your work, your dreams, that was everything to me. You never abandoned me. You flew. The final paragraph destroyed me. By the time you read this, I'll be gone, and I need you to know that you were loved completely, perfectly, by your real mother. I'm sorry I couldn't give you my name. I'm sorry I couldn't claim you publicly. But I can give you everything else. The house is yours. The savings are yours. Everything I have is yours because you are my daughter, and you deserved better than you got from this family. Be strong, my beautiful girl. Live boldly. And know that every single day of your life, I loved you with everything I had. Always, Mom. I couldn't see the page anymore through my tears. I sat in that leather chair in Mr. Harrison's office and sobbed, grieving all over again, but this time for a mother I didn't know I'd lost, for a love I didn't know I'd had, for a truth that changed everything. But the will didn't just leave me the house. There was something else, something that would force my sister and mother to face what they'd done. You won't believe what happened next. Mr. Harrison gave me 20 minutes to compose myself, stepping out of his office and returning with water and more tissues. When I could finally breathe normally again, he sat down and pulled out the official documents. Your grandmother was meticulous, he said. She anticipated every possible challenge to this will, and she protected you thoroughly. He walked me through it page by page. The house, all 7,000 square feet of Victorian history on 3 acres in a historic district, was mine. The savings accounts, totaling nearly $2 million, were mine. The investment portfolios, the vintage car collection, the art and antiques, all of it mine. Your mother and sister were each left $10,000, Mr. Harrison said carefully, with a very specific clause attached. He showed me the clause, and I had to read it twice to believe it. Grandma Rose had written that Sarah and Claire would receive their inheritance only if they signed a document acknowledging that they had failed in their duty to love and support Rebecca as she deserved, and that this failure was a source of deep pain to Rose Bennett in her final years. It was essentially forcing them to admit their cruelty in writing to get their money. She's making them confess, I whispered. Mr. Harrison nodded. Your grandmother wanted accountability. She also included a provision that if they contest the will, they forfeit even that $10,000, and it goes to charity. She made it very clear that this was not a negotiation. But that wasn't all. Grandma Rose had also left detailed letters for my mother and Claire, to be delivered by Mr. Harrison, explaining the truth about my parentage and her reasons for the inheritance structure. I delivered those letters 2 days ago, Mr. Harrison said. Your mother called me 17 times yesterday. Your sister left voicemails that were quite colorful. They're demanding a meeting with you. My stomach twisted. Do I have to see them? Legally?
No.
The will is ironclad. But your grandmother included one more request. He pulled out a final letter, this one addressed to all 3 of us. She asked that I arrange one family meeting here in my office where the truth could be discussed openly. She wanted you to have the choice of closure or separation. It's entirely up to you. I sat there thinking about everything I'd just learned. My whole life had been a lie, but it was also a love story I'd never known existed. Grandma Rose, my mother, had loved me so much she'd sacrificed claiming me publicly to protect me and give me stability. My legal mother, Sarah, had agreed to raise me but had never truly opened her heart to me. Claire had been raised to see me as competition, never knowing we were actually cousins, not sisters. The anger I felt was massive, but so was the grief, and underneath it all was something else. Relief. Relief that I hadn't been crazy all those years, feeling like I didn't quite belong. Relief that someone had loved me completely, even in secret. Relief that Grandma Rose had seen my worth even when others couldn't. "I'll meet with them," I finally said. "But on my terms. I want you present as moderator. I want everything documented. And I want to be very clear that I'm not giving up anything that Grandma Rose left me, no matter what they say or what they threaten." Mr. Harrison smiled slightly. "Your grandmother predicted you'd say exactly that. She said you had her spine." He scheduled the meeting for the following Monday, giving me the weekend to process everything, to grieve, to prepare for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life. I left his office and walked through downtown Charleston, past the old churches and historic homes, past the palmetto trees and wrought iron gates, feeling like a stranger in a city I'd grown up in. Everything looked the same, but I was completely different now. I spent that weekend alone in my hotel room, reading and rereading Grandma Rose's letter, crying and laughing and feeling 1,000 emotions I couldn't name. I looked at old photos on my phone, seeing them with new eyes. Every picture of Grandma Rose and me together now showed a mother and daughter, not grandmother and granddaughter. The way she held me, looked at me, smiled at me, it was all there and I'd been too blind to see it. I thought about my childhood, about the summers at her house that felt more like home than anywhere else. The art lessons in her studio, the long talks on the porch swing, the way she always made me feel special, chosen, important. She'd been mothering me all along, loving me openly but in secret, giving me everything she could within the boundaries of the lie she'd agreed to live. By Monday morning, I was exhausted but ready. I put on my best suit, the navy blue one I wore for important client presentations, did my makeup carefully, and braided my hair the way Grandma Rose had taught me when I was little. I looked in the mirror and saw her eyes looking back at me. I'd always thought I looked like her, and everyone had commented on it, saying I had the Bennett genes. Now I knew why. I was her daughter, in every way that mattered. I drove to Mr. Harrison's office with my shoulders back and my head high, ready to face the women who'd shaped my life in ways I was only beginning to understand. Whatever happened in that room, I was walking in as Rebecca Bennett's daughter, and that changed everything. The moment I walked into that conference room and saw their faces, I knew this wasn't going to be an apology. It was going to be war. My mother and Claire were already seated when I arrived, sitting on one side of Mr. Harrison's conference table, like they were presenting a united front. Mom looked older than I remembered from the funeral, her face drawn and pale, deep circles under her eyes. Claire looked furious, her jaw tight, her hands clenched on the table in front of her. Neither of them stood when I entered. Neither of them greeted me. The hatred in Claire's eyes was so intense I almost stepped back. Mr. Harrison gestured to the chair across from them, and I sat down slowly, placing my purse carefully on the table, taking my time, refusing to show fear even though my heart was racing. "Thank you for coming," Mr. Harrison began formally. "As you all know, we're here to discuss Rose Bennett's will and the information she left for her family. I want to establish ground rules. Everyone will have a chance to speak without interruption. I will moderate to keep things civil, and all legal decisions have already been made and are not up for discussion. This meeting is about communication and closure only." Claire immediately exploded. "Closure? Closure? She stole our inheritance. That house has been in our family for 4 generations, and she has no right to it." Her voice was shrill, echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "She wasn't even part of this family. She left. She abandoned Gren." Mr. Harrison held up his hand. "Miss Claire Morgan, I will ask you to lower your voice or this meeting will end immediately. And I would remind you that the house was purchased by Rose Bennett with her own money, not family money, so it was hers to leave to whomever she chose." Claire's face turned red, but she clamped her mouth shut. My mother finally spoke, and her voice was cold, controlled. Rebecca, this is very simple. Rose was not thinking clearly in her final months. She was on medications, she was grieving, she was confused. That does not represent her true wishes. We're prepared to offer you $500,000 to sign over the house and the rest of the estate to Claire and me, and we can all walk away from this ugliness. I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me but never loved me, who'd fed me and clothed me and educated me as part of a bargain with her own mother. Did you read the letter Grandma Rose left for you? I asked quietly. My mother's lips thinned. I read it. It was the delusion of a dying woman trying to justify favoritism and rewrite history. You were my daughter on paper, Rebecca. I raised you. That makes you mine, not hers, regardless of biology. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. You raised me like an obligation, I said, my voice shaking slightly. You fed me and clothed me and sent me to school, but you never loved me like you loved Claire. You never hugged me the same way. You never looked at me with pride. I spent my entire childhood wondering what was wrong with me, why I could never be good enough for you. That's not true, my mother said, but her eyes shifted away from mine. I treated you both equally. You were just more difficult, more rebellious, always questioning everything, always wanting more than this family could give you. She wanted a mother, Mr. Harrison interjected quietly. She wanted to be loved. Rose's letters document years of your coldness toward Rebecca, Sarah. Years of favoritism toward Claire. Years of making Rebecca feel unwelcome in her own home. That's not equal treatment. That's psychological cruelty. My mother's face hardened. You don't know what it was like, raising someone else's child, watching my mother pour all her love into Rebecca while treating Claire like an afterthought. Do you know how that felt? Watching my own mother love my sister's child more than my actual daughter? The room went silent. Claire's eyes widened. What? She whispered. My mother closed her eyes, realizing what she'd just admitted. Claire, I said gently, Grandma Rose wasn't my grandmother. She was my mother. You and I aren't sisters. We're cousins. Your mother raised me as part of an agreement with Grandma Rose, but I was never really her daughter. I was always Grandma Rose's. I watched the information hit Claire like a physical blow. She looked from me to our mother, her face going pale. Mom, is that true? Sarah nodded stiffly. It's true. My mother got pregnant at 48 by some man from Atlanta, and it would have been a scandal that destroyed her reputation and her career. So I agreed to raise you as my own, Rebecca. It was supposed to be a blessing. We wanted another child, but Mom couldn't let go. She had to be involved in everything, had to undermine my parenting, had to make you special. She made me feel loved, I said, my voice breaking. Something you never did. I did my best, Sarah snapped. I gave you a home, a family, a name. I protected you from being labeled a bastard in a town that would have crucified you for it. You have no idea what I sacrificed. You sacrificed nothing, I said, anger finally rising in my chest. Grandma Rose paid for that house. She paid for my education. She gave you money for years. You got a free child and financial support, and all you had to do was love me, and you couldn't even do that. You treated me like I was defective because I reminded you that your mother loved someone else's child more than she loved you. The truth of it hung in the air. Sarah's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment I saw the hurt child underneath the cold mother, the daughter who'd felt replaced by her own mother's second chance at motherhood. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not after a lifetime of coldness, of criticism, of being made to feel less than. Claire, I said, turning to my sister, my cousin, I'm sorry you're finding out this way. I know this is a shock. But you have to understand that Grandma Rose loved you too. She left you money. She wanted you to be taken care of. But I was her daughter, and she left me what a mother leaves her child." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "We grew up together," she whispered. "You're my sister, Rebecca. I don't care about biology. You're my sister." But even as she said it, I could see the betrayal in her eyes, the anger, the feeling of being lied to her entire life. "If I'm your sister," I said softly, "then why did you kick me out of the house 3 months ago? Why did you tell me I deserved nothing? Why have you spent years making me feel like I was the problem in this family?" Claire looked away, and I had my answer. She'd treated me exactly how she'd been taught to treat me by our mother, by the family dynamics that said I was less important, less valuable, less deserving of love and inheritance. Then my mother said something that revealed just how deep her jealousy ran and why she'd really agreed to raise me. The real reason would shock everyone. My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Her composure was cracking, and something uglier was emerging underneath. "You want to know the truth, Rebecca? The real truth." Her voice was shaking with rage she'd apparently been holding back for decades. "I agreed to raise you because my mother paid me to. Not just the house, not just your education. She paid me $50,000 a year, every year, to pretend you were mine. It was a business transaction, and I fulfilled my end of the bargain. I raised you, fed you, clothed you, and sent you to good schools. I did everything required. But she wanted more. She wanted me to love you like you were mine, and I couldn't do it." The words hit me like physical blows, but I forced myself to stay still, to keep my face neutral. Mr. Harrison was watching Sarah with something like disgust. Claire looked horrified. "Why couldn't you love her?" Mr. Harrison asked quietly. "She was a child, an innocent child who needed a mother." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Because every time I looked at her, I saw my mother's betrayal. I saw proof that even at 48 years old, even after raising me, even after being widowed and supposedly settling into proper grandmotherhood, my mother was still more passionate, more alive, more everything than I ever was. She had a love affair. She created a child from passion. And what did I have? A careful marriage to a careful man in a careful life. Rebecca was a walking reminder that my mother had lived more in 1 year than I had in my entire existence. The raw honesty of it was stunning. This wasn't just about inheritance or family obligation. This was about a daughter who'd felt eclipsed by her own mother, who'd watched Rose Bennett live boldly and love deeply even in widowhood, while Sarah herself had chosen safety and convention. "And then," Sarah continued, her voice rising, "I had to watch my mother pour all the love she never gave me into you. All the art lessons I begged for as a child that she was too busy for, she gave them to you. All the heart-to-heart talks I wanted, she had them with you. The trips to museums, the college advice, the encouragement to be brave and independent, all you. She raised you the way I wished she'd raised me, and I was supposed to smile and pretend to be grateful that she was such a wonderful grandmother." "So, you punished Rebecca for it," Mr. Harrison said flatly. "You punished an innocent child because you were jealous of your own mother." "I fulfill my obligations," Sarah said coldly. "I never hit her, never neglected her physical needs, never failed to provide. But no, I couldn't love her. And Rose knew it. She saw it every day, and instead of honoring our agreement and backing off, she doubled down. She made sure Rebecca knew she was special, made sure Rebecca felt loved by her, and that made everything worse. It turned my own daughter against me." "I'm not against you, Mom," Claire said quietly, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I'm trying to understand all of this. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did we all have to live this lie? Because in Charleston, in our family, in our social circle, appearances matter, Sarah said. A 48-year-old widow having a baby out of wedlock? That would have destroyed us. We did what we had to do to protect the family name, and I don't regret it. What I regret is that my mother used her money and her guilt to control us all for 3 decades. I finally found my voice. Grandma Rose didn't control anyone with guilt. She loved me because I was her daughter, and she tried to make up for the fact that you couldn't. She paid you because that was the only way to ensure I had a home and stability. But she never stopped being my mother in her heart, even if she couldn't say it out loud. I pulled out my phone and found the folder of voice messages I'd saved over the years. She called me every night for 15 years. Every single night. We talked about everything, my day, my dreams, my struggles, my victories. She was my mother in every way that mattered, and you can't take that away from me with your bitterness and jealousy. I played one of the messages on speaker, Grandma Rose's warm voice filling the conference room. "Hi, my beautiful girl. I'm just calling to say goodnight and tell you how proud I am of you. You landed that big client today, and I know how hard you worked for it. I always knew you were destined for great things, Rebecca. You have my heart and my spirit, and watching you soar makes every difficult day worth it. I love you more than words can say. Sleep well, sweetheart." There were tears on my face, but I didn't wipe them away. Claire was crying too, and even Mr. Harrison looked moved. Only Sarah sat rigid and unmoved, her face a mask of controlled anger. "That," I said quietly, "is what a mother sounds like. That's love. That's pride. That's unconditional support. I never heard that in your voice, Sarah. Not once in 34 years. And now I know why, and you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. Grandma Rose made sure I would be taken care of, made sure I would have security and stability, made sure I would never have to beg you for anything ever again. She set me free from needing your approval or your love. And that's the greatest gift any mother could give." Sarah stood frozen for a moment, and then she gathered her purse and turned to leave. "Take it all, Rebecca. Take the house, take the money, take your righteous indignation. But know this, you'll always be the bastard child that destroyed my relationship with my mother. You'll always be the reason our family fell apart. And when you're sitting alone in that big house with all your money and no one to share it with, remember that you chose this. You chose to take everything instead of being reasonable. You chose to burn bridges instead of being family." She walked out, leaving Claire and me sitting across from each other, staring at the space where she'd been, both of us trying to process the venom she'd left behind. But Claire didn't follow her out. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before and said something that would change everything between us. Claire stayed in her seat, her hands folded on the table, tears streaming down her face. The silence after our mother left was heavy, filled with 34 years of lies and half-truths and complicated emotions neither of us knew how to name. Mr. Harrison quietly excused himself to give us privacy, closing the conference room door behind him, and suddenly it was just the two of us, cousins who'd been raised as sisters, women who'd been pitted against each other without even knowing why, daughters of a family that had built itself on secrets. "I didn't know," Claire said finally, her voice small and broken. "Rebecca, I swear I didn't know any of this. About you being Grandma Rose's daughter, about Mom being paid to raise you, about any of it. I thought." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I thought you were just the rebellious one who didn't care about family. That's what Mom always said. That you were selfish and ungrateful, that you'd abandoned us for your fancy life in Boston. I believed her because she's my mother, because I trusted her version of reality." She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry for kicking you out of the house. I'm sorry for all the years of competing with you, of trying to be the better daughter, of judging you for choices that now make complete sense. I sat there feeling my anger soften slightly, seeing Claire not as the golden child who'd been chosen over me, but as another victim of our mother's bitterness and Rose's impossible situation. Did you feel it? I asked quietly. Did you feel Grandma Rose pulling away from you, loving me more? Is that why you resented me? Claire nodded miserably.
Yes. God, yes.
When we were little, Grandma Rose loved us both equally, or so I thought. But as we got older, especially after you turned 12 or 13, it was like you became her entire world. You got all her attention, all her time, all her special treatment. I couldn't understand what I'd done wrong, why I wasn't enough anymore. Mom told me it was because Grandma felt sorry for you, because you were difficult and needed extra attention. So I tried to be perfect, tried to be easy, tried to prove I was the better granddaughter. You were perfect, I said softly. You were everything they wanted. Pretty, obedient, conventional, content to stay in Charleston and follow the rules. I was the one who didn't fit, who asked too many questions, who wanted more than this town could offer. I couldn't help it, Claire. I was suffocating here. Claire smiled sadly. I know that now. I can see it now. But back then, all I saw was you leaving, you rejecting everything I valued, you getting all of Grandma Rose's love, while I got Mom's approval as a consolation prize. It felt like you got the better deal. She paused, fresh tears falling. And now I find out you actually did get the better deal, because Grandma Rose's love was real, and Mom's approval was just, what? Performance? Transaction. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us grieving different losses. Me for the mother I never knew I had, Claire for the grandmother who'd pulled away because she was secretly loving her real daughter, both of us for the mother who'd chosen bitterness over love. What do we do now?
Claire asked.
How do we move forward from this? Are we still sisters? I thought about it carefully. We're cousins by blood, I said. But we were raised as sisters, and that's real too. We can't erase our childhood together. The question is whether we want to build something honest going forward, or if there's too much damage. Claire leaned forward. I don't want to lose you, Rebecca. I know I haven't been a good sister to you. I know I've been judgmental and cold and competitive. But finding out the truth today, hearing what Mom said, seeing how she treated you, it's making me question everything. I spent my whole life trying to earn love from a woman who is capable of raising a child for money without ever opening her heart.
What does that say about me?
What does that say about the values she taught me? Her voice cracked. And Grandma Rose, who I thought favored you for no reason, was actually just being a mother to her daughter. That's not favoritism. That's love. And I'm starting to realize I've been on the wrong side of this family dynamic my entire life. I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been hard and protected for years. I don't want to lose you either, I admitted. You're the only sister I've ever known, blood or not. But Claire, I can't go back to being the family's scapegoat. I can't go back to feeling less than, or being blamed for things that weren't my fault. If we're going to rebuild, it has to be as equals, as two women who were both hurt by circumstances beyond our control, not as the good daughter and the bad daughter. Claire nodded vigorously.
Yes.
Equals. Cousins, sisters, friends, whatever we want to be. But honest. No more lies, no more pretending, no more living up to Mom's impossible standards. What about the inheritance? I asked carefully. Are you okay with Grandma Rose's will? Claire took a deep breath. Honestly, it stings. I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt to know that the house I grew up in, The house where I thought I'd raise my own kids someday belongs to you now. But Rebecca, after hearing what Mom said today, after understanding the real story, Grandma Rose was right. She was your mother, and a mother leaves her estate to her child. That's how it should be. That's fair. She wiped her eyes again. The $10,000 she left me with that confession clause? I'm going to sign it. Because it's true. I did fail you. We all did. And if acknowledging that in writing is what it takes to start making amends, then I'll do it. I reached across the table and took her hand, and she gripped it tightly, both of us crying now, both of us exhausted from years of tension we'd never understood. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. We sat there for a long moment, holding hands across the polished conference table, two women who'd been taught to compete finally choosing connection instead. Can I ask you something?
Claire said.
When you were talking to Grandma Rose every night, when you had that relationship with her, were you happy? Did she make you feel loved enough to make up for what you weren't getting from Mom? I thought about all those nightly phone calls, all those conversations where Grandma Rose poured her heart into me, where she taught me to value myself and trust my instincts and believe in my worth. Yes, I said honestly. She saved me, Claire. I don't know who I would have become without her love. Probably someone bitter and broken, someone who believed I was fundamentally unlovable because my own mother couldn't love me. But Grandma Rose taught me that the problem wasn't me. She made me strong enough to leave, to build my own life, to not need approval from people who were never going to give it. She gave me the foundation I needed to survive. Claire smiled through her tears. I'm glad. I'm glad you had that, even if it meant I felt left out. You needed it more than I did. She squeezed my hand. So, what happens now? Are you moving back to Charleston? Are you going to live in the house? I hadn't thought that far ahead, but suddenly I knew the answer. I don't know yet. I have a life in Boston, a career I've built, a whole world up there. But I also have a house full of memories here, a legacy for my mother that I want to honor. Maybe I'll split my time. Maybe I'll renovate and create an art studio like Grandma Rose always wanted. Maybe I'll figure it out as I go. I looked at Claire. But whatever I do, I want you to be part of it. Not as the girl who used to live there, but as my family, my cousin, my sister. If you want that. I want that, Claire said immediately. I want to know you, the real you, not the version Mom told me about. I want to understand why you left and what you built and who you became. I want to be actual sisters, not just people who share a history. We talked for another hour, sharing stories and perspectives and memories we'd never discussed before, slowly building a bridge between us that should have existed all along. When we finally left Mr. Harrison's office, we walked out together, not as adversaries but as allies, two women who'd survived the same dysfunctional family and were choosing to write a different ending. But our mother wasn't done yet. What she did next would force me to make a choice between peace and justice, and the whole town would be watching. 3 days after the meeting at Mr. Harrison's office, I was staying at a bed and breakfast in downtown Charleston, taking time to go through Grandma Rose's house and decide what to do next, when my phone started blowing up. Text messages, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, social media notifications flooding in faster than I could read them. My hands shook as I opened Facebook and saw what my mother had done. She'd posted a long, detailed statement on her public profile, the one she used for her book club and charity work and social networking with half of Charleston's society crowd. The post was titled "A Daughter's Betrayal," and it was a masterpiece of manipulation. She'd written about how her ungrateful daughter Rebecca had stolen the family home through manipulation of an elderly woman with dementia, how I'd isolated Grandma Rose from the family in her final years and poisoned her mind against her real relatives, how I'd swooped in after years of absence to claim an inheritance I didn't deserve. She painted herself as a grieving mother who'd lost both her mother and the family home to a conniving, selfish daughter who cared only about money. She never mentioned that I was actually Grandma Rose's biological daughter. She never mentioned the agreement she'd made or the money she'd been paid. She certainly never mentioned her confession in Mr. Harrison's office. The post had already been shared 200 times. The comments were brutal. People I'd gone to high school with, people who barely knew me, people from my mother's social circle were all weighing in with their opinions about my character. I always knew Rebecca was cold. One comment read, "She never came home, never visited. This doesn't surprise me at all." Another said, "Poor Sarah. After everything she did for that girl, this is how she gets repaid. Disgusting." Someone else wrote, "Money changes people." Rebecca showed her true colors. I hope she's happy living in that house knowing she destroyed her family for it. I sat on the bed in my B&B room, my heart pounding, my face hot with humiliation and rage. She was destroying my reputation publicly, using social media as a weapon, knowing that in a town like Charleston where everyone knows everyone and reputation is everything, this kind of post could follow me forever. My phone rang, and it was Claire. "Rebecca, have you seen it?" Her voice was panicked. "Mom's post is everywhere. People are talking about it at my office, at the grocery store, everywhere. She's making you look like a monster." "I know," I said, my voice tight. "What do I do, Claire? Do I respond? Do I tell the truth? Do I expose her lies and break the family open in public?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. If you respond, it becomes a public war. Everyone will take sides. It'll be ugly. But if you don't respond, people will believe her version. They'll think you really did manipulate Grandma Rose."
She paused.
"Rebecca, I'll back you up if you decide to tell the truth. I'll confirm everything. I was there. I heard what Mom said. I know the real story now." I thought about Grandma Rose, about her choice to keep secrets to protect reputations, about how that secrecy had poisoned our family for decades. I thought about her letter to me, her encouragement to live boldly, to be strong, to stand up for myself. And I made a decision. "I'm not going to fight her on social media," I said. "That's playing her game, and I won't win there. But I'm going to set the record straight in a way that matters. I'm going to talk to Mr. Harrison about releasing a statement through proper channels, through the newspaper, through legal documentation. I'm going to tell the truth, but I'm going to do it with dignity." Over the next 2 days, I worked with Mr. Harrison to craft a response. We prepared a letter to the editor of the Charleston Post and Courier, a respected newspaper that had been publishing in the city for over 200 years. We also prepared legal documentation of the truth, including excerpts from Grandma Rose's letters that proved her mental competency and her reasons for the will structure. Mr. Harrison warned me that going public would open up the family secrets to everyone, that people would gossip, that my mother would be humiliated. "Are you prepared for the fallout?" he asked. "Once this is out there, it can't be taken back." "I'm prepared," I said. "My mother made this public when she posted those lies. She tried to destroy my reputation to protect her own image. But I won't let her rewrite history. Grandma Rose deserves to have the truth told, even if it's messy and complicated and embarrassing. She loved me enough to claim me in her will even if she couldn't claim me in life. The least I can do is honor that by refusing to hide anymore." The letter to the editor was published on a Friday morning, and by noon, it was the talk of the town. I'd written it carefully, explaining that I was Rose Bennett's biological daughter, that I'd been raised by her daughter Sarah as part of a private family arrangement, that Rose had left me her estate as a mother leaves to her child, and that the recent social media attacks were based on incomplete information and deliberate misrepresentation. I included Mr. Harrison's professional statement confirming that Rose had been fully competent when making her will, that she'd left detailed letters explaining her choices, and that any claims of manipulation or undue influence had been thoroughly investigated and found baseless. I didn't attack my mother directly, but I stated clearly that the inheritance was not theft, that Rose's decisions were made with full awareness and intention, and that I was proud to be Rose Bennett's daughter in every sense that mattered. The response was immediate and divided. Some people apologized for jumping to conclusions. Some people doubled down on supporting my mother. Some people were shocked by the revelation that Charleston society matriarch Rose Bennett had had a child out of wedlock at 48. But underneath the gossip and shock, there was something else. Respect. People who knew Grandma Rose, who'd been her students or colleagues or friends, started sharing their own stories. A former student wrote a beautiful tribute about how Rose had encouraged her to pursue art despite family pressure to be practical. A colleague wrote about Rose's integrity and strength. Someone who'd known her in her later years wrote about how she'd talked lovingly about her daughter Rebecca, how proud she was of my independence and success. Slowly, a counter-narrative emerged, one that painted Rose as a woman who'd lived on her own terms and loved fiercely, and me as a daughter who'd been loved in secret but claimed in death. Then I received a visitor at the house who would reveal one more secret, something Grandma Rose had hidden even from me, something that would finally explain everything. I'd moved into Grandma Rose's house the week after the newspaper letter was published, finally claiming the space that was legally mine, walking through rooms filled with memories and art and the scent of her lavender sachets, still tucked into drawers. I was in her studio, the room where she'd painted and taught and created for decades, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find an elderly man, probably in his late 70s, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Rebecca," he asked. "I'm James Whitfield. I was your grandmother's colleague at the university. May I speak with you?" I invited him in, making tea in Grandma Rose's kitchen while he settled into the living room, looking around with the expression of someone seeing a place they'd visited before. "I debated whether to come," he said when I handed him his tea. "Your grandmother asked me to wait until after her will was settled, until you knew the truth about your parentage. She gave me a letter to deliver to you when the time was right, and she made me promise to tell you something she couldn't write down." My heart started racing. "You knew about me?" He nodded. "I knew everything, Rebecca. I was Rose's closest friend in her final years. She confided in me, trusted me with the truth because she needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge her for the choices she'd made." He pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket, my name written on it in Grandma Rose's handwriting. "Before you read this, I need to tell you about your father. Rose asked me to, because she couldn't bear to put all the details in writing, but she wanted you to know." He took a sip of tea, gathering his thoughts. "Your father's name was Marcus Whitfield. He was my younger brother." I nearly dropped my teacup. James smiled sadly. "Rose met Marcus when he came to guest lecture at the university. He was a brilliant artist, a sculptor, passionate about his work and about life. They had an instant connection, a recognition of kindred spirits. Their affair was brief but intense, just 3 months before Marcus died in that car accident. Rose was devastated, and then she found out she was pregnant. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked. "Why keep it secret even after all these years?" James sighed. "Because Rose asked me to, and because I respected her wishes. But also because telling the truth would have complicated things legally, emotionally, in every way. Marcus was married, Rebecca. Unhappily married, separated from his wife, but not yet divorced. If the truth had come out, his wife could have tried to claim parental rights to you. There would have been scandal, legal battles, ugliness that Rose wanted to spare you. So she kept Marcus's identity secret, even from Sarah, telling her only that your father was a man from Atlanta who died. I sat back, absorbing this new layer of complexity. So I have an uncle, I said slowly. You're my uncle. James nodded, his eyes misty. I've watched you from a distance your whole life, Rebecca. Rose sent me photos, told me stories about you, kept me updated on every milestone. I was at your college graduation, standing in the back where you wouldn't notice me. I've seen your design work featured in magazines. I've been proud of you from afar, and I've grieved that I couldn't claim you publicly as my brother's daughter, as my niece. He gestured to the envelope. Read the letter. Rose explains better than I can. I opened the envelope with shaking hands and began to read. Grandma Rose's letter was shorter this time, but every word carried weight. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, then James has found you, and you know the truth about your father. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about Marcus while I was alive. I'm sorry you've had to discover your heritage in pieces, through letters and revelations after I'm gone. But I need you to understand that every choice I made, every secret I kept, was to protect you from pain and complication. Marcus was a beautiful soul, creative and passionate, and full of life, and you are so much like him it takes my breath away. The letter continued. I kept his identity secret because I wanted you to have a simple story, not a scandalous one. I wanted you to be Rose Bennett's granddaughter on paper, raised in a good family, accepted in society, free from the stigma of illegitimacy and adultery. Was it the right choice? I don't know. But it was the choice I made out of love. Now you know the whole truth. You are the daughter of Rose Bennett and Marcus Whitfield, conceived in love, born into complication, raised in secret, and claimed in death. You are the product of two artists who loved beauty and truth and creativity, and you carry that legacy in every cell of your body. James has something else for you, the letter concluded. Something Marcus made before he died, something I've kept safe all these years, waiting for the moment when you would know who you really are. Accept it with my love and Marcus's spirit, and know that you come from a lineage of brave, creative, passionate people who lived on their own terms. I'm so proud of who you've become, my beautiful daughter. Live boldly. Love deeply. Create beauty. Always, Mom. I looked up at James through tears. What did Marcus make? He smiled and stood up. Come with me to my car. I couldn't bring it to the door. It's too large. We walked outside to his SUV, and he opened the back hatch to reveal a sculpture wrapped in blankets. Together, we carefully carried it inside and placed it in the studio. When James unwrapped it, I gasped. It was a bronze sculpture of a woman dancing, her body captured in mid-movement, one arm extended toward the sky, her face turned upward with an expression of pure joy and freedom. The detail was extraordinary. Every curve of muscle, every line of movement, every emotion captured in metal. Marcus called it Joy Unbound, James said quietly. He made it the month before he died, the month he met your mother. Rose always said it looked like her, the way she felt when she was with Marcus. But I think it looks like you too, Rebecca. It looks like the woman you've become. Strong, free, unbound by other people's expectations. I stood there staring at this sculpture my father had created, this piece of art that connected me to a man I'd never known but whose creativity and passion lived in my blood. I reached out and touched the bronze, feeling the cool metal under my fingers, imagining my father's hands shaping it, imagining the love that had created me flowing through his art. Thank you, I whispered to James. Thank you for keeping this safe, for waiting all these years to give it to me, for being the connection to my father I never knew I had. James hugged me, and I let myself be held by this uncle I'd just discovered, this link to a whole side of my family I'd never known existed. With the truth finally complete, I had to decide what kind of life I would build with this legacy, and my choice would honor both of my parents in a way no one expected. Standing in Grandma Rose's studio with Marcus's sculpture and James's presence, I felt something shift inside me. All my life I'd been trying to figure out where I belonged, who I was supposed to be, why I never quite fit into the mold my family had created for me. Now I understood. I was never supposed to fit. I was the daughter of two artists, two passionate souls who'd lived authentically even when it was complicated, even when it was difficult. I was Rose Bennett's creative spirit and Marcus Whitfield's artistic vision, combined into someone who was always meant to forge her own path. Over the next few months, I made decisions that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. I sold my condo in Boston but kept my design business, restructuring it to allow remote work and flexibility. I moved into Grandma Rose's house permanently, claiming it not as a prize I'd won, but as a legacy I'd inherited, a space filled with love and art and possibility. I renovated the entire third floor into a design studio for myself, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern equipment, a space where I could create and work and build my business while being surrounded by the energy of two generations of artists. I turned Grandma Rose's studio into something she'd always dreamed of but never quite achieved, a community art space. I opened it twice a week for free classes, teaching painting and drawing and mixed media to anyone who wanted to learn, continuing her legacy of encouraging creativity and supporting artists. I hung Marcus's sculpture in the entrance hall where everyone could see it, a reminder that art comes from passion and authenticity, that creating beauty is an act of courage. The classes filled up immediately, and I found myself teaching teenagers and seniors and everyone in between, watching them discover their own creative voices the way Grandma Rose had helped me discover mine. Claire became one of my regular students, showing up every Tuesday evening with sketchbooks and questions and a willingness to try something she'd never allowed herself to do before. We grew closer through those sessions, talking while we painted, sharing memories and perspectives, and slowly building a real relationship based on honesty instead of competition. She told me about her marriage, about feeling trapped in a life that looked perfect but felt empty, about wanting more but being afraid to reach for it. I encouraged her the way Grandma Rose had encouraged me, reminding her that it was never too late to choose authenticity over appearances. My mother never apologized. She never reached out, never acknowledged her public attack or her confession in Mr. Harrison's office. But about 6 months after I moved into the house, I received a short email from her. I signed the document. It said, "Mr. Harrison has my confession and my acknowledgement that I failed you. Take your $10,000 and your self-righteousness and your perfect new life. I hope it makes you happy." There was no signature, no closing sentiment, just those bitter words. I showed the email to Claire, who shook her head sadly. "She'll never change," Claire said. "She'll never admit that she was wrong or that her choices hurt people. I've accepted that. I'm building a relationship with you instead, and that's enough for me." I donated my mother's $10,000 to a scholarship fund for art students at the university where Grandma Rose had taught, establishing it in her name and Marcus's name together, finally giving them the public recognition as a couple that they'd never had in life. The university was honored to accept it, and James helped me set up the criteria. The scholarship would go to students who showed creative promise but came from non-traditional backgrounds, students who didn't fit the mold but had the passion and vision to succeed anyway. It felt like the perfect way to honor both of my parents and their belief in authentic creativity. James became a regular fixture in my life, stopping by for tea once a week, sharing stories about Marcus and about the Whitfield family I'd never known. He introduced me to cousins and extended family who were shocked and delighted to discover Marcus had a daughter, people who welcomed me with open arms and showed me photos of my father as a young man, photos where I could see my own eyes and smile reflected back at me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere completely, not because I'd forced myself to fit, but because I'd finally found my people. The house itself transformed under my care. I kept Grandma Rose's touches, her art and her furniture and her beloved garden, but I added my own style too. Modern lighting and updated kitchen, contemporary art alongside her classical pieces, a blend of old and new that felt like honoring the past while embracing the future. I hosted dinners and gatherings, filling the house with laughter and conversation, and the kind of warm community that Grandma Rose had always created wherever she went. People started calling it Rose House around town, and instead of being known as the site of a family scandal, it became known as a place of creativity and welcome and second chances. I even started dating again, meeting someone through the art classes, a divorced father of two who appreciated authenticity and wasn't intimidated by strong women with complicated families. His name was Daniel. He taught history at the local college, and he made me laugh in a way I hadn't laughed in years. It was nothing serious yet, but it was proof that building a life based on truth and self-acceptance could open doors I'd thought were closed forever. Grandma Rose would have loved him, and somehow I felt her approval every time he visited, every time we sat on her porch swing talking about books and ideas and the future. But the final chapter of this story wasn't just about me finding peace. It was about understanding the ultimate gift Grandma Rose had given me and how I would pass that gift forward. 1 year after Grandma Rose's death, I organized a memorial event at Rose House. It wasn't a funeral or even a traditional memorial service. It was a celebration of creativity and courage, an art show featuring work from my community classes alongside pieces Rose had created, and even some of Marcus's photographs and sketches that James had preserved. I invited everyone. The students from my classes, James and the Whitfield family, former colleagues of Rose's from the university, even Claire and my mother, though I knew Mom wouldn't come. The house was filled with people on that warm September evening, the gardens lit with string lights, art displayed on every wall, music playing softly in the background. Claire brought her husband and kids, and I watched my nieces run through the rooms where I'd played as a child, their laughter echoing off the same walls that had witnessed so much pain and secrecy and complicated love. James gave a beautiful speech about Rose and Marcus, about how their brief love had created ripples that extended far beyond their own lives, how creativity and passion have a way of multiplying and spreading through generations. I stood up to speak, looking out at all these faces, some familiar and some new, all connected by their relationship to Rose or to art or to the community we'd built in this house. My mother, Rose Bennett, I began, and the words felt powerful in a way they never had before, taught me that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. She loved me in secret for most of my life, mothering me from a distance because circumstances made it impossible to claim me publicly. Some people might see that as tragic, as insufficient, as a loss. But I see it as proof that love finds a way, even in the most complicated situations. I talked about the nightly phone calls, the letters, the trust fund, and the education, and the constant encouragement to be myself even when that self didn't fit the family mold. I talked about how Rose's final gift wasn't just the house or the money, but the truth, the liberation of knowing I was loved completely and intentionally, that I wasn't effective or difficult, just different. She waited until after her death to tell the whole truth. I said, because while she was alive, she had to balance so many competing needs: her daughter Sarah's reputation, my stability, her own career, and standing in the community. But in death, she finally got to be fully honest, fully herself, fully my mother. And that honesty set all of us free in different ways. I looked at Claire, who was wiping tears from her eyes. My cousin Claire, who I grew up calling my sister, had to face the reality that her mother couldn't love a child who wasn't biologically hers, and that the grandmother she thought had favored me unfairly was actually just being a mother to her daughter. That truth hurt, but it also freed her to stop competing, stop trying to be perfect, and start being authentic. We're building something real now, something based on truth instead of lies. Claire nodded, smiling through her tears, and I felt the bond between us, stronger now than it had ever been when we thought we were sisters. And my mother, Sarah, I continued, my voice steady even though this was the hardest part, had to face the reality that she'd chosen money over love, that she'd raised me as a transaction instead of as a daughter, and that her bitterness and jealousy had poisoned her relationship with her own mother for decades. She chose not to be here tonight, and I respect that choice, even though it makes me sad. But I forgive her, because I understand now that she was suffering in her own way, feeling eclipsed and replaced, and never quite enough for her passionate, creative mother. Hurt people, and sometimes the most loving thing we can do is acknowledge that truth and choose to break the cycle. I talked about Marcus, about discovering my father through James's stories and the sculpture that now stood in the entrance hall, about understanding that creativity and passion were my birthright, inherited from two people who'd lived boldly even when it was complicated. Marcus and Rose taught me, even without being able to raise me together, that authenticity matters more than appearances, that creating beauty is an act of resistance against a world that wants us all to fit into neat boxes, and that love, real love, doesn't always follow the rules, but it always finds a way to express itself. The final part of my speech was about the future, about how I was using this house and this inheritance to continue Rose's legacy of encouraging artists and supporting people who didn't fit the mold. This house is now officially the Rose Bennett Creative Foundation, I announced. I've worked with Mr. Harrison and James to establish it as a nonprofit organization that will offer free art classes, scholarship funding, and artist residencies for people who need support and encouragement to develop their creative voices. It's my way of paying forward the gift Rose gave me, the gift of being seen, being valued, being loved for exactly who I am. The room erupted in applause, and I saw James standing in the back with tears streaming down his face, proud of what I'd built with the legacy of his brother and his friend. After the speeches, people mingled and ate and looked at art and shared stories, and I moved through the crowd feeling genuinely happy for the first time in my adult life. This was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the pain or pretending the damage hadn't happened, but transforming it into something beautiful and useful, something that could help others. Late that night, after everyone had left and Claire had helped me clean up and then headed home to her own family, I sat alone in Grandma Rose's studio with a cup of tea and looked at the portrait she'd painted of me when I was 16. In the painting, I was sitting on the porch swing, reading a book, completely absorbed in my own world. Rose had captured something in my expression that I recognized now, the look of someone who is already halfway gone, already planning her escape, already knowing she didn't quite belong in the world she'd been born into. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered to the empty room, to the spirit of the woman who'd loved me enough to sacrifice claiming me publicly, but refused to sacrifice loving me completely. "Thank you for seeing me, for knowing me, for making sure I'd be okay after you were gone. Thank you for the truth, even though it was complicated and messy and hard. Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't always look conventional, but it's always worth fighting for." I felt her presence in that room, in the art supplies she'd used, in the north-facing windows she'd insisted on for perfect light, in the worn spot on the floor where she'd stood at her easel for 40 years. I thought about my mother, Sarah, probably sitting alone in her own house, bitter and isolated because she'd chosen to protect her pride instead of opening her heart. I genuinely felt sorry for her because she'd missed out on so much, the joy of loving freely, the freedom of admitting mistakes, the peace that comes from authenticity. But I couldn't save her from her own choices. I could only save myself, build my own life, create my own legacy. And that's exactly what I was doing. As I sat there in the quiet house, I realized that this whole journey, painful as it had been, was actually the greatest gift Grandma Rose could have given me. Not the house, not the money, not even the truth about my parentage, but the ultimate lesson she'd embodied her entire life. That dignity comes from knowing your worth, that strength comes from honoring your truth, and that love, real love, never requires you to be anything other than exactly who you are. She'd spent her life teaching me that lesson, and then she'd spent her death proving it by finally, fully claiming me as her daughter. I stood up, washed my teacup, and walked through the house, turning off lights, touching the walls, feeling the energy of all the life and love and creativity that had happened within these rooms. This was my house now, my legacy, my foundation for building something meaningful. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom that had been Rose's and was now mine, slipped between sheets that smelled like lavender and hope, and fell asleep feeling at peace for the first time in 34 years. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and a text from Claire asking if she could bring her daughters over for Sunday breakfast. I smiled and texted back yes, already planning pancakes and art projects and laughter, already building the kind of family relationships based on truth and love that should have existed all along. This was my life now. Authentic, complicated, creative, free. This was Rose Bennett's daughter, Marcus Whitfield's daughter, finally fully herself and unafraid to live boldly. And somewhere, I knew Grandma Rose was smiling, proud of the woman I'd become, satisfied that her sacrifice and her secrets and her fierce protective love had all been worth it because I'd survived, I'd thrived, and I'd learned the most important lesson she had to teach. Your worth is not determined by who claims you publicly, but by who loves you completely. And when you know you're loved, really loved, you become unstoppable. True family is built on love and acceptance, not blood or obligation. The greatest gift we can give someone is the freedom to be authentically themselves, and the greatest legacy we can leave is teaching others to live boldly, love deeply, and refuse to shrink themselves to fit into someone else's expectations. Dignity, self-worth, and the courage to embrace your truth are inheritances more valuable than any estate.